Shabbat Shalom. Ahaya Bayeshem, Yeshua HaMashiach. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Ephraim coming at you on another Shabbat. Today's date is September 12th, 2020. And clearly, if you are hearing the sound of my voice in YouTube, we're blessed to see yet another day, and all praise due to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. All right. So, uh, today's lesson is a really interesting one because I've been wanting to do it for a while. So we're going to I'm try to cover it today and keep it as short as possible. But of course, it's not about length. It's more about apprehension, comprehension, and so forth. So today's lesson on this Shabbat is the quote unquote lost books of the Bible that should have been included. Okay. Now, many of you may or may not know that uh, the Apocrypha or the apocryphal books, many kind of argue with for and against that. Everyone knows how I feel about the Apocrypha. Even though it was included in the 1611 King James Bible, I am of the mindset that it should not have been included at all. Because unlike the other 22 books that were left out of the Bible, the Apocrypha was never mentioned by anyone. It's not mentioned anyone in Torah, Tanakh. I mean, you won't find the Apocrypha mentioned anywhere. Okay, but I'm not going to get into that. Today, as a matter of fact, I have a video that covers why we should reject the Apocrypha. You can check that video out once you listen to this lesson and then kind of tie them together. But like I said, unlike the Apocrypha, the 22 books that I'm talking about today were actually mentioned by name in the Bible. And it's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Okay, pastors and bishops and whatever, they don't teach on this stuff. They just gloss right over it. Many of them may or may not even know that it exists. But we're going to get into that today. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, first and foremost, like I said, these books, what makes them so unique is they were actually mentioned literally by name in the Bible. All right, and the first one was the book of the covenant. Exodus 24:7 refers to that book. And it says, quote, "And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. And they said, All that the Lord hath said will we do, and be obedient." There are those that believe the book of the covenant is found in Exodus chapters 20 through 23. There are no authoritative sources for this text. Okay? And that's the first book, all the way back to Exodus. It was mentioned by name, but it's not included in the Bible. And then the question becomes, well, why not? Because one of the biggest misconceptions by Christians and Israelites and some Israelites is that if somehow a book is not included in the Bible, that it's not true. And that thinking itself is not true. Okay? Because if you understand the process for how the books were entered into what they call the canon, then you'll know that men were behind that process of deciding which books were and which books were not going to be included into the Bible as we know it. Okay, so let's pause that. All right, the second book mentioned is Book of the Wars of the Lord. Now, this book is mentioned by name in Numbers 21 and 14. Now, if you want to, you can get your King James Bible, no other version. Get your King James Bible and follow along, and you'll see it along with me as I'm going through them. And it says, Numbers 21 and 14, "Wherefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, what he did in the Red Sea and in the brooks of Arnon." All right. It says, certain sources believe that this is to be found by drawing text from several quote unquote Old Testament books. There are no quote unquote authoritative sources for this text. Now, I don't know why they keep saying that, because if the books were mentioned by name in the Bible, that's the authority in itself. All right. So let us continue moving right along. Now, this is probably the most important book, or the most talked about book, that was left out of the Bible. It's called the Book of Jasher. Okay. Now let me say this too. Many of these books you can actually find. If you do a Google search, you can do. Many of them comes on. You can get it for free on PDF. Type in the title of the book, and then put PDF as the extension, and click search, and it should come up if there's a PDF version of the book for it. Or many of them you can actually order. The Book of Jasher is one that I ordered. All right, and the Book of Jasher is actually mentioned in Yehoshua or Joshua 10:13. And it says, and the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? Huh. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And then the book of Jasher was again mentioned in 2 Samuel 1 and 18. He also bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow or bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So there you have the book of Jasher mentioned twice in Torah. Yet the book of Jasher is nowhere to be found. Okay, so let's continue. The manner of the kingdom / book of statutes. That's mentioned in 1 Samuel 10 and 25. And it says, then Samuel told the people the manner of the kingdom and wrote it in a book and laid it up before the Lord. And Samuel sent all the people away, every man to his house. And if many of you remember who Samuel is, Samuel kind of got looked over because he didn't have control of his own house. All right, that's a whole other lesson in itself. You have to have control of your own house before you can head God's house. Okay. All right. The next one is the book of Samuel, the seer. And that book is found in 1 Chronicles 29 and 29. And it says, now the acts of David the king, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Samuel the seer, and in the book of Nathan the prophet, and the book of Gad the seer. Now, in that one scripture and verse, it literally mentions 3 books by name. All right? By name. Yet, they're not in the Bible. Again, the question is, or the questions you should be asking is why? Okay? This Nathan the prophet, that's found in 1 Chronicles 29:29. All right? And the 2 Chronicles 9 and 29. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Seonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat? All right? Let's continue. The Acts of Solomon, that's found in 1 Kings 11:41. And the rest of the Acts of Solomon, and all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? Wow. So we know how important Solomon was, and we know all about his rise and fall of coming back, to the Most High, and the circumstances surrounding his birth with David, and that whole story. And yet the Acts of Solomon is not even in the Bible. Yet it's mentioned by name. And you would have to think to yourself, like, if all these books are mentioned by name, they were mentioned for a reason. And if these books were mentioned for a reason, yet we don't have the books, then clearly we're missing a lot. So in the spirit of transparency, yes, but in the spirit of wanting to do some serious researching, uh, I would highly recommend that you get some of these books. Definitely the Book of Jasher. Get you an exhaustive concordance of the Bible. This is for the ones that are really serious about getting some serious studies in. Okay, and get these books. Read it. Figure out for yourself, why do you think they left them out? And once you read them, you may have your answer. You pray to the Most High for discernment. Because anyone can read anything, but it doesn't mean you'll be able to understand it or know what it's referring to, or whatever the case may be. So pray for discernment. Ask the Most High to gift you with the spiritual eyes, that you can see, and spiritual ears that you may be able to hear from Him, and thus said the Lord. Okay. All right. Um, Next is Shemaiah, the prophet. Uh, that's found in Second Chronicles 12 and 15. Now the acts of Rehoboam, first and last, are they not written in the book of Shemaiah, the prophet, and of Ethiel, the seer, concerning genealogies? Ah, and there were wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. So Shemaiah the prophet, I'm pretty sure has a lot to say about that. Between those two wars, probably goes more in depth. So try to get the book of the Acts of Rehoboam and the Shemaiah the prophet. Okay. Next we have the prophecy of Abijah. That's in Second Chronicles 9 and 29. It says, "Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Anijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Edo the seer against Jeroboam and the son of Nebat?" All right. And the story of the prophet Edo, Second Chronicles 13:22. "And the rest of the acts of Abijah and his ways and his sayings are written in the story of the prophet Edo." All right. The visions of Edo the seer, that's found in Second Chronicles 9 and 29. It says, "Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah and Shilonite, and in the visions of Edo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat?" And this is a one concerning our genealogies. I did a lesson on this last week on how important our genealogy is to the Most High. And the Edo genealogies, which was left out of the Bible, is found in Second Chronicles 12 and 15. This is, "Now the acts of Rehoboam, first and last, are they not written in the book of Shemaiah the prophet, and of Edo the seer, concerning genealogies?" And I'll bet my last dollar there's some very, very, really interesting things in that book about our genealogies and just how important it is, as an addendum to the Most High. So you can get a hold of the Edo genealogies. All right. Then we have the book of Jehu. Wow. It says, that's found in Second Chronicles 20 and 34. It says, "Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Jehu, the son of Hanani, who was mentioned in the book of the kings of Israel." Ah, the book of Jehu. That's definitely sounds like an interesting read. All right, let us continue. The sayings of the seers. That's found in Second Chronicles 33 and 19. It says, "His prayer also, and how God was entreated of him, and all his sin, and his trespass, and the places wherein he built high places, and set up groves and graven images, before he was humbled. Behold, they are written among the sayings of the seers." Wow. And as I'm reading this, I mean, it's like, I'm aware of this, but just kind of reading it, it just kind of reinforces in my mind like how much we're really missing, how much we really don't know or don't understand. And this is one of the reasons why I made it a point to do a lot of in-depth studying. I don't just read one book and think I know it, or yeah, that's it. No, I've read several books, and many of these I've actually read. I actually own a lot of these books. And that's a nice segue into the next one, the Book of Enoch. Now, for those who may not know or be aware of just how uh, favored Enoch was, just to give you a brief history for context on Enoch. First of all, Enoch was seventh from Adam. Okay, uh, Genesis tells us that. So he's from way, way back. And what it tells us about Enoch is that Enoch walked with God, for God took him, for he was not, and I believe that word is missing, is he was not found, because supposedly God literally took Enoch right into heaven. He caused a darkness to come over the earth, and he literally took Enoch right into heaven after Enoch had ascended to heaven. and God gave him his instructions of what to do when he came back. And once he was done, once his mission was complete, the Most High came and took him literally into heaven. So they say that literally Enoch and Elijah are the only two men that literally walked into heaven. Like, they didn't die, quote unquote. So and you would figure, you'd have to figure, okay, Enoch walked with God, right? So, well, what did God tell him, right? Like because you'd have to think just conceptually. He wasn't walking with the Most High, and no words were exchanged, right? So common sense would say, well, what did the Most High tell him, right? And first of all, how did he walk with God? Where was he, right? So if he had to walk with God, one of two things had to happen: either God was here on earth walking with him, or he was in heaven. And if you know the story of Enoch, you know that he ascended to heaven. Okay, and what it is that the so-called quote unquote powers that be, the story of Enoch was just too frightening for them. They was like, oh no, we can't put that out. We can't put out a man went into heaven and walked with God and saw God face to face. Oh no, we can't have that. So what did they do? They put a bunch of scriptures in the Bible that says no man has seen God face, and that was in direct contrast to Enoch. But the thing is, you're contradicting something you didn't even include. So it's kind of crazy because some of those scriptures in there was in direct refutation of Enoch, right? Because we know that Enoch ascended to heaven. The angels came and got him and took him to heaven, and they showed him each level of heaven, right? And so, not to really, I don't want to go too much into it, but if I really highly recommend you research the books of Enoch. I have all of his books, and I think of all the books mentioned by name in the Bible, I think the book of Enoch is probably the biggest travesty that it was not included in the Bible. And I mean, really, seriously, that book of Enoch, man, the books of Enoch, it's just, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna get off of it. Even though Genesis is attributed to Moses, the reality is Genesis is actually the works of Enoch. Okay, but he's not correctly cited at all. So they gave it to Moses. Genesis was about what 5,000 years or so, whatever, before Moses was even born. Like, how could he even give us Genesis? People don't even think about that. Well, he couldn't, but they attributed Genesis to Moses because they left Enoch out and they didn't give Enoch proper credit. All right. As a matter of fact, that's a nice segue into Jude 1 and 14 because it says, and Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints. Now, the why that's so important is that Jude 1 and 14 quotes Enoch. It literally quotes him, but the book that they quoted him from is not in the Bible. It's like, what in the right? So something is amiss. So yeah, I highly recommend you guys Googling or going to Amazon and ordering the books of Enoch. I promise you will not be disappointed. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, so moving right along. The next book that was left out of the Bible that should have been included is called the Book of Gad the Seer, and that's found in 1 Chronicles 29 and 29. Now the acts of David, the king, first and last, behold, they are written in the book of Samuel the seer, and in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the book of Gad the seer. Acts of Uzziah, Second Chronicles 26 and 22. Now the rest of the acts of Uzziah, first and last, did Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, write. So yes, the acts of Uzziah. All right, Second Chronicles 26 and 22. And then the annals of King David, First Chronicles 27:24. It's Job, son of Juriah, began to count the men, but did not finish. Wrath came on Israel on account of this numbering, and the number was not entered in the book of annals of King David. Wow. I don't have that one. That sounds like one I'm gonna have to go searching for. The annals of King David. Okay. And the very last one, Jude 1 and 3, beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you the common salvation, it was needful for me to write unto you and exhort you that ye should earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints. Now let me just say this, and that pretty much concludes all the books that were mentioned by name in the Bible, but were not included. But let me just say this, just for the sake of thought and edification, right? You figure if whoever wrote that piece in Jude, clearly they knew of the Book of Enoch. I mean, they literally quoted him, which I think was again grossly unfair because you're quoting from a book that's not even in the Bible. So for people to read that or have read that and probably didn't give it a second thought or even think to say, well, wait a minute, where's that at? Where did he say that at? So clearly they had knowledge of the Book of Enoch. And if you research the books of Enoch, you will see that Enoch was a very, very powerful, favored man of the Most High. He really is. I mean, next to Yeshua Hamashiach, to me, he was the most. He's my he's my most favorite prophet, for lack of a better, term. Okay, he was highly, highly favored. So yeah, and it makes you think, well, if they knew about it and they quoting from it and they thought it important enough to quote from, well, why didn't they include it into the Bible? I mean, don't they think that that would have been useful to us, right? Um, but thankfully, the books are in existence. Like I said, I actually own all of Enoch's books, and I highly recommend you go to Amazon and order it. Okay. All right, so that's that. Hope it wasn't, too long, but I thought that was a very, very important lesson to give today on this Shabbat. Again, I'm wishing you all a very happy, safe, and blessed Shabbat to you and your families. And until next time, this is Dr. Ephraim saying, Hayya Yeshem, Yeshua HaMashiach. Shalom.